Hello, this is Dr. Flight. This is going to be a video on campaigns for communication, and this is something that we would do in the planning process for developing an advertising campaign or promotional campaign, in developing kind of the goal of why we want to communicate to our market and the process steps that are involved with that. So this is a fairly high level overview of a number of different steps that we would take in the communication process and in the planning process. Okay. Okay, as we look at the campaign process for distributing a message, we want to just highlight a few steps and go from there. And we'll walk through each of these steps as in a little bit more detail, but this should be fairly straightforward with a lot of different processes in marketing. The steps are very, very similar and repeatable. So generally speaking, we start with identifying who we want to receive our message. So think about your market segment, or the recipient of your message, followed by identifying the goals that you will set for your for the messaging campaign, like goals and objectives. What do you want to achieve as a result of this message that you want to send out? Followed by identifying the promotional mix components. Now, promotional mix components are the components within we have the four P's. One of the four P's is promotion, and then within promotion we have generally five major components, and that's what we mean here when we say select the promotional mix. So, advertising. Will you do any advertising? Will you maybe do some public relations, direct selling, some type or form of a promotion, or some type of interactive or digital media? And those are the five big areas that make up the promotional mix. Um, and we need to decide which of those major areas we're going to use. We may use a little of all of them, but we want to think about how that's going to work. And we use those big items when we think about the IMC concept as well. Then we need to develop our message. So what do we want to say? How do we want to say it? How do we want to code our message? We want to select the specific media. So this would be the outlets and the vehicles that we're going to use to actually carry the message to the listener, to the receiver. We want to focus on and develop a budget. So the budget's important because the budget relates to the outcomes and the goals that you have. Generally, we know that if we advertise certain ways or if we message certain ways, we're going to get some results. And so sometimes it's a matter of like putting enough money behind the campaign to effectively reach the audience numbers wise. So we have to be able to tie in the effectiveness of the campaign with the dollars that we're spending. And then finally, we want to measure results. So again, go back to the goals and the objectives of the actual campaign, and ask yourself, at what benchmarks would we want to be at to know whether this campaign is successful or not. Okay, so those are the snapshot items. Now, one of the things that we'll do is once we have these results, or once we have, some anticipated benchmark accomplishments as a result of this campaign, we want to go back and we want to revisit how we're structuring the campaign in order to improve it. So this is a continual improvement thing. And if you remember the communication model that you might see has one step in it called the feedback loop. And the feedback loop in this demonstration here is oftentimes the results that you're going to get. So if you get results, we compare those results to what our goals were, and then based on that, we tweak our messaging. We tweak maybe the outlets that we put the messages on, we tweak the promotional mix that we're using perhaps, and then we rerun the advertisement, or we rerun the promotion, or we continue to run it to see if those changes improve the results that we're getting. So there's got to be a feedback loop that happens here. And again, this is a very typical management style type of a process where you set goals initially, you develop your program, you make sure it fits within a budget, you justify your budget by your results, and then you execute. Then after you execute, you change and update your program based accordingly. Okay, so we'll walk through a couple of these steps here that we're talking about. And the first one, of course, is identifying your targets for the promotion. And this work should primarily be done already, in the sense that you know who your target audience is, because this is your market segment. And again, thinking about the dollars you're going to put behind your campaign, the more precise you are in identifying your targets, the more accurate your campaign will be, and the better the effectiveness will be of the media buys that you ultimately make. Moving on to step 2, we want to talk about the different goals and objectives you may have. Now, you may have goals that are focused on outcomes like sales and revenue and units sold or whatever, awareness numbers, things like that. In communication studies and in decision making, sometimes we focus on 3 different goals based on the decision making process. One would be awareness and attention, or the goal to inform. One would be to focus on the decision-making process and evaluation, where people evaluate different options in front of them, and we want to persuade them at that point to choose ours. And then another set of goals may be to a market that has already bought our product or is already aware of our product, and we want to simply keep our product and our brand top of mind for them. So we do reminder ads and campaigns. Okay, so we can look at this as a whole, and we can, take some time, and I encourage you to pause this screen, or even maybe take a look in the text, and make sure that you kind of remember and understand that there's informing, persuading, and reminding. And they're a bit self-intuitive. So to inform, we want to make sure that we're educating our consumers and our market on the features of the products, especially if you have a new product. We want to explain how the product works and what our product, what it will do for you, what needs it will satisfy for you. And it's broadly an education type of a stage where we're informing, we're educating, we're bringing new information to the consumer. Persuasion is one where we want to compare our product's benefits to that of our competitors, and we want to, sell the product's benefits to the consumer and give them reason to buy our product based on what it will do, and maybe even the cost savings and things of that nature. So we want them to emotionally become attached and drawn to the product, but we also want to clearly, show them with some logic why our product's best. Maintaining consumer relationships, long-term relationships, getting people to rebuy the product is something that we do during the reminder stage. And again, you don't want to mix these up. You don't mix and match these up. In other words, you don't want to do 2 of these at the same time. Generally, when we focus on a campaign, we have one goal and we want to achieve that goal. And when you have multiple goals, then messaging gets very, very, very messy, and consumers are confused and not really entirely sure about what the message is about. If you have multiple goals, it just doesn't really work particularly well. So then that's yeah, that's what it is. So number 3 then, after we think about those goals, is selecting the promotional mix. Again, I mentioned these before, the big categories that are within the promotional mix toolbox: advertising, sales, public relations, personal selling, and then direct and interactive marketing, there's a number of things that can lend themselves to making this decision. So the type of product that you offer, or the type of product may lend itself better to one of these five, or a mixture of these five elements when we choose the promotional mix, and the percentage of money we're going to put behind and effort we're going to put behind each of these five areas. So think about what is normal or what is expected for your product category. If it's a product that is easily used by a lot of people, we might do more advertising. If it's something that's highly technical or complicated to understand, we might do more personal selling. If it's something, if it's something that we can narrowly define and focus on, we might do some focused advertising specifically to a niche audience, maybe using direct or interactive marketing or something along those lines. So again, think of the nature of the offering or the nature of the product, specifically the product category too, and that will help clarify or help guide you in terms of the percentage or the proportion of each of the five promotional mix components to use in your advertising campaign. So number two, when we're selecting the promotional mix, consider the stage of the offering. And you can think of this in the product lifecycle form, and you can also attach the goals that you have for the campaign as well when we're doing this. So remember, we have something called the product lifecycle chart, our sales. The blue line here are our sales over a period of time, and this would be within a product category, not specifically within, not necessarily specific product sales over time, but a product category sales over time. And let's just say, for instance, we want to do some different advertising along this life cycle. Early on, we want to inform. And remember the goals of informing. We want to bring information to the marketplace. We want to educate consumers. Once we have more competition during the growth stage, we have to really focus on why our product is better than our competitors, and we want to do a lot of persuasion messaging to win customers and to gain market share, or at least maintain market share that we've formed already in the early introduction stage. Then finally, we want to get into the reminder advertising once the product is more established. And remember, when we are in this part of the product life cycle, we want to re-win or maintain our loyal customers and bring them back and get them to buy again. And at this point, the product category and the product is well established, and people can actually forget that you exist. So doing reminder ads help us do this. Now, certainly the types of mix elements, again, will be better, depending on where you are on these types of things. When we want to do persuasion types of appeals, those might be more direct, for instance. We might do more focused advertising or focused direct selling types of campaigns during that. We may also do some promotions which encourage people to come in and buy now, and they really motivate consumers to buy quickly and in a lot of volume. So again, the mix that we're using can vary by product life cycle stage, and what the objectives are as you move through those stages. Two more elements that help decide what we're going to do for that mix of tools that we'll use. The nature of the market. So again, remember, we're communicating to a group of receivers, of listeners, of an audience, and we want to think about this audience as a market segment. That market segment will be used to or agreeable to listening to messages in certain ways. If that messaging, or if the market that you're focused on is very homogeneous and very focused, like a niche, then we can do a lot of direct advertising. We can do even direct selling. We can focus our messaging we can narrowcast is what it's called when we're really focused on one small group of consumers. If, however, the market that you've chosen is generic and it's very broad, then we're probably going to have to do a lot of advertising, which reaches mass markets. Okay, so again, the nature of the market helps define what type of marketing mix we're going to use here. And then finally, budget. And budget's actually a whole nother item. Remember on that list of steps here, we do a budget later on. Just keep in mind that each of the types of communication tools we have vary in their financial effectiveness. Personal selling, one-on-one selling, one-on-one communications tend to be very expensive on a per unit or per message basis. So, if I have a high profit margin, then it makes sense for me to do direct selling. But if I have a very low, small profit margin, if I'm really focused on volume, then I need to use a mass and volume focused campaign, which would mean advertising probably, as opposed to personal selling or PR promotions or whatever. Okay, so think very clearly about how you want to balance these promotional mix elements and what proportion of each one you feel you should use. All right, moving on, next few steps, and we'll go through these fairly quickly. Developing a message. Now, in communication studies, there's a lot of research on message development. And so I'm not going to go into so much detail, but we do need to have some type of artistic or linguistic hook that gets people motivated and thinking about doing what we want them to do as a result of this communication. So oftentimes we have this thing called an appeal, and it's basically it's like a linguistic or a verbal hook that gets you wrapped around the concept of whatever we're trying to message. But it does more than that because it taps into some motivation that the consumer or the listener has and gets them attached to the product or the message on a level that again, it's more psychological. And it helps them understand maybe the relevance of the product and why they should attach to it, attach to the message and act on the message. So different appeals then. Rational appeal is one where we use maybe some logic and maybe we compare our product's benefits to our competitors' benefits and we try to make a logical argument as to why the consumer should buy our product. Emotional appeals tap into our happiness or sadness, fear, those types of appeals. So there's an emotional component, and we want to create the emotion and then attach our product to it. Humor appeals place our product in a humorful setting. Fear appeals usually deal with the fear of loss. Like if you don't use this product, you will lose something. And moral appeals may be a higher order type of thing, like doing the right thing, doing what's best for society, and so forth. A couple other messaging elements here. There are different ways to construct messages beyond the appeal, hook that's creating the thing. Right now, storytelling is a big deal. It's been a big deal for a long time, but there's probably been a little bit more focus on it lately. We have different sided arguments like pros and cons and making those arguments. And those might be an example of some different execution styles. Okay, so again, I don't want to downplay the importance of messaging, but it's really there are entire courses and areas of study on message development, which could be interesting to pursue. Other steps, we have 3 more steps to focus on that we'll just touch on real quickly. Selection of the media for our messaging. Okay, so again, we've chosen, say, a mixture of advertising and direct selling and promotions and maybe digital media and so forth. And we've done that at a pretty high level. But when we execute the actual campaign, we need to specifically decide on where and how the message will be delivered and received by the recipient. So we decided, say, for instance, we're going to do advertising, do a little bit of advertising. Well, when we execute the campaign, we need to actually specify where the advertising will occur. Will it be on TV? Will it be on radio? Will it be on the internet? Where will it happen? And then specifically, where will the consumer come into contact with it? So if it's on TV, specifically what TV channel and what time of day and during what program, when exactly will that consumer see and hear that message? Now, there's a ton of research, obviously, on placing ads and ad placement, media placement, media buys, all that stuff. So again, this is an enormous area. I don't want to downplay it, but we could spend an entire semester literally talking about that. Number 6, preparing the budget. So there's a number of different ways to budget, and again, this is a management type of a thing a lot of times. The absolute best, from a textbook perspective, is called the objective task method. So remember the objective task method as the ideal method for us to develop a campaign. Two other methods, the comparative parity method, that would probably be the second best method to use. So with the comparative parity method, we look at our competitors and we basically match what they're doing. So if our competitors spend a certain amount on advertising or messaging, we mimic them and we try to stay in a competitive spirit in line with what they're spending. The objective task method is an interesting method because basically what we do is we take the goals and objectives of the campaign and then we ask ourselves, what do we need to do? What are the tasks we need to do to achieve those goals and objectives? And then how much will it cost for us to complete those tasks? So it's a 3-step process. Identify your goals, identify the tasks you need to perform to achieve the goals, and then assign a budget that represents the tasks that need to be done. So that's why objective task is really ideal. It's really what we want. Now, it's rarely used, but this is what we would want because it ensures that we'll have enough money to actually fulfill the goals of the campaign. Comparative parity is probably, in my opinion, the second best. A lot of people use percentage of sales. Now, percentage of sales is a challenging one. So basically what we do is we forecast our sales for an upcoming period, and then we take a percentage of that and assign that to our budget for advertising. So we might project we're going to have $500,000 in sales this next quarter, and we might say, well, look, I want to take 10% of that and put it into advertising. And so 10% of sales will go into advertising. The problem with that, well, there are lots of problems, but the biggest problem that I think of when I think of that is this idea that if sales go down, it means our advertising dollars will go down. And that's very counterintuitive. When your sales go down, generally you want to increase your advertising to build awareness and meet the goals that you have. So again, it's counterintuitive. If your sales go down, using this method says that you should spend less on advertising because your sales are going down, and the percentage can stay the same. 10% of $500,000 is more than 10% of $400,000, and if your sales go from 500 to 400, that means you're going to be spending less. So it's a bit counterintuitive, and it doesn't really fly well with real real money management. The all-you-can-afford method is the worst. We want to avoid that. And basically, this is like a leftover method. Sometimes it's called that, the leftover method, where we basically do our operations, run our business, and whatever money we have at the end of the period, we'll throw that at advertising. And that's just silly. I mean, that's just a bad approach. It's disrespectful to the whole industry, and it really downplays the value of messaging. So that we don't want to do. Okay, and the last thing that we talked about was establishing measures and identifying the results of the actual campaign. So again, we base these measures on our goals and objectives, and we want to like measure how effective our campaign is in relation to those goals and objectives. So typically what we're going to do is look at things like our reach, our frequency. We're going to look at maybe the effectiveness of our buys, so cost per thousand, CPMs, and all of our costs per exposure types of measures. Those are good things to look at to gauge the effectiveness of our campaign. And we also need to look at the results based on those goals, like how many more sales have we had? How many more customer inquiries have we had? How much more profit margin do we have? And so on. So there are certainly those goals as well. So we have campaign goals based on effectiveness, and then there are business model goals as well that advertising contributes towards. Okay, so this has been a review then of the campaign communication campaign process. There's 7 different steps involved here. Each one is obviously important. And as you do campaigns, so you may do 4, 5, 6 campaigns a year, you want to follow a similar pattern for each one that you do. All right, if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks. It's good touching base with you. I hope this has been a helpful review. And again, let me know, reach out to me if you have any questions. Thanks.